It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
That's right, everyone. You are here with 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick, Chiefs Digest, alongside restricted rights tender enthusiast Nick Jacobs from KSHB 41. Nick, it's free agent time.
It's getting pretty close. Combine starts this week, and then we'll have that just right around the corner after the combine ends. So, I mean, hey, I hope you enjoyed not having football for a couple weeks, because that's over now. That's over now.
100% over. I mean, the franchise tag window is open. Chiefs have, that only runs until March 4th. So that's a pretty quick turnaround. Yep. Still not expecting the Chiefs necessarily to use the franchise tag. We'll see what happens, but they've got a little bit more than a week to decide on that. This week is the combine, so most of your news that you'll be hearing will be coming from Indianapolis. Brett Veach, Andy Reid will be speaking from there. Player availability starts on Wednesday, runs through Saturday, so be a lot going on in Indianapolis. But closer to home, Nick, as we get ready for it, right now, what we're going to do today is we're going to play a little GM. We're going to go through and look at the Chiefs free agents, which, they've got, by my count, 28 players who are not currently under contract. And that includes the unrestricted free agents. It includes the restricted free agents, exclusive rights free agents. Those are some usually pretty easy decisions, and, maybe one tricky one this year. But, this is when you start making those decisions about who you're going to keep and who you're going to let walk, who you're going to let test. You're not thinking about this on March 12th when the new league year begins. You've got to have those decisions made already. And so we're going to play a little Brett Veach today, Nick, and decide who we would keep and who we walk away from.
Wait, so we're not going to put like an overall mock-off season, and I'm not going to send it to you on Twitter and get your thoughts on it? We're going to do a whole podcast on it, Matt?
We're doing a whole podcast on it.
Goodness.
I know. We're going to exhaust the subject.
All right. Let's light that candle then.
All right. Well, let's bang it out real quick with maybe the quick and easy decisions. And, and then we'll get into the more difficult ones with the unrestricted free agents. But Chiefs have 3 exclusive rights free agents. What these are players that have less than 3 years experience. Sometimes they're draft picks that were waived and came back on 1-year deals. Sometimes they're undrafted free agents, be different things, but have 3 of them: Matt Araiza, Mike Caliendo, Spencer Schrader, kicker. None of them are big decisions, for Araiza I think it's just Caliendo would just be a $1.03 million tender. It has to be the minimum salary for their years of experience. $960,000 for Araiza and Schrader. Pretty easy. You're tendering Araiza and Caliendo. Probably not Schrader, because you really don't need another kicker around right now. But
well, and for me personally, I would look at the number of where Caliendo's vet minimum's at, because the tough part is when you do allow him potentially to go to free agency, there is a chance another team's going to pick him up. So from a developmental perspective, if your O-line coach Andy Heck and Corey Matei, the assistant O-line coach, if they like where he's at and like where the development's at, then they're probably going to say, yeah, go do it. That's worth that price for a backup guard. And then, if you do that one, that's fine. I personally, I would be okay with walking away from Caliendo, but I get it if they don't. And then Araiza, 100%. You're bringing back, and you're trying to work with him on touch punting. So whenever you got to add some touch and some finesse to it and not just boom it, you could put that in the corner and keep it, inside the 5-10 and not just boom it directly out of the end zone where your gunner doesn't have a chance, and you take a lot of the guesswork out of your gunner, maybe misreading it and not being able to get to it. So that's the thing you're working on that front. And then, like you said, with Schrader as a kicker, you let him test the market, and then if you want to bring him back or bring in another kicker for competition, just so you kind of have them on a Rolodex type of thing like the Chiefs seem to like to do sometimes, and I get that too. But I wouldn't be tendering the backup kicker.
There's also 5 restricted free agents, and these are players that have 3 years experience And so they're in their 4th year. This is the last year before they would be eligible for free agency. And there's 3 different designations you can use on them. You can give them a first round tender, a second round tender, or the right of first refusal. And, first round tender would mean a contract of at least $7.4 million for 2025. Second round and would be 5.3 million. And that means if a team were to sign the player that you've tendered this amount to, you would get a first or a second round pick from them. And then the right of first refusal just means that, hey, another team can make an offer to them, but you get to match it if you give them this minimum tender. And that one's the 3.267 million if you want to get down to the last decimal points. And the Chiefs have 5 players in that. And I think honestly, maybe only a couple that I think I would definitely tender. There might be some that you let test the market and see what they can get. Keith Taylor, Peyton Hendershot, Nazeeh Johnson, Jack Cochran, and Malik Herring. To me, I think Johnson and Hendershot are the 2 that I would consider. I can see Dave Toub maybe pounding the table for Jack Cochran because he's been a pretty valuable special teams player for them. But at that value for $3.2 million, I think Hendershot and Johnson are the only ones I would consider. And maybe even try and, work out more, lower deals. I mean, that's above the vet minimum salary for those players at their experience level. So you could negotiate something less than that. But if you don't tag them, you lose all rights of, matching whatsoever.
Yeah. For me, all those would have to be vet minimum. That may not be what they want to hear, and they may think they can get better on the open market. And if they do, they do. But Nazeeh, I would, that's got to be that minimum, because I know his current APY is about 900,000. Malik's is at 985,000. Keith Taylor's is at 985. Peyton Hendershot, the only thing I really know about him is 1, that they traded for him, and 2, I see a lot of pushing and shoving after plays. Whether it's on special teams or occasionally when he was blocking on offense, but there's just not a lot there other than the special teams factor from a tight end perspective. And they may draft a tight end, they may sign a tight end, and he's just replaced at that point. But I think where Hendershot, and I don't see the value other than that minimum for somebody like Hendershot. Being a special teams contributor at $3 million, that's wasteful spending right there.
Yeah, I mean, especially with Hendershot, if you are offering him that tender, it's with the belief that that in year 2, when he's got a full year with the system, that he can be more of a contributor in the passing game. And whether the Chiefs believe that or not, I mean, what their decision on him will tell you a lot about what they think of him and whether they think he can be more in year 2. All right, we made those decisions pretty quickly, Nick. Now the more difficult ones will be with the unrestricted free agents, and these are the ones that will be able to test the market. Obviously, you could use the franchise tag, and we'll discuss whether we would or could or should use the franchise tag on 1 or 2 of these players, make decisions there. Want to start with the offense? I mean, we can just go straight down the order. I mean, unless you want to go with big names first, Nick. I mean,
Matt, you just drive this ship where you feel it needs to go, and we will make podcast magic either way.
All right, we're going to make this quick and easy then. We'll just go through offense and defense, go through the position groups, and make those decisions. Start on offense, quarterback, Carson Wentz.
No. I think he, like I've talked about before, I think he's got a certain realm with him, and a lot of that has to deal with how to play action. That's where he's most comfortable. That's where he gets into rhythm and everything. And the Chiefs offense to me is more than that. And I was really hoping for him and for his career in that Broncos game that he would have a much better showing than what he did. And unfortunately, I just didn't see enough there to where I'm like, hey, that really needs to be invested in. Like if he'd been more accurate and if he'd shown more to me in training camp and then built off that in the Broncos game, I would have been like, okay, cool. But from watching from training camp to that Broncos game, I just didn't see much of a difference from what I had watched in August versus there. And I was hoping to, because being in that offense the entire year, in the system and everything, I was expecting to see more in the Broncos game, and I didn't.
I mean, he signed for $3.3 million for 1 year last year. I mean, I wouldn't mind that coming back. I mean, it gives you at least some security of knowing a guy in year two. Chiefs seem to like Carson Wentz. I certainly get walking, but if it comes down to if not him, then who? If there's somebody else out there that you like better, go for it. But I wouldn't be opposed to the Chiefs. I would be on the fence with Carson Wentz, but probably leaning towards going ahead and sticking around with him. So here we got one where we already disagree, Nick. So
for me,
I like this.
For me, like I'm saying here, like if they re-sign him, I'm not gonna get upset about it and be like, hey, I get it. But I mean, like, you're asking me to be the decision maker in this situation, and like for me personally, I'm just like, yeah, I'm like, I don't, because it seems like they're trying, and this is just my perspective on it, is like it seems like they're trying to get Patrick exposed to different quarterbacks over time, different quarterback styles, different quarterback ways of thinking to help him continually evolve. And so like Blaine Gabbert was a different quarterback than what Matt Moore was, and obviously what Chad Henne was, and then he's a different quarterback than what Carson Wentz is. So I think part of the benefit of having different quarterbacks come in each time is that Patrick is getting exposed to different thought processes and different systems that each one of these quarterbacks have been a part of to really kind of help him continue to evolve his game, just even from having a different voice in the quarterback room with him.
And I mean, at some point, the Chiefs are going to have to make a decision about whether they're comfortable with somebody like a Chris Oladokun being their backup, whether they want to invest a draft pick in a quarterback and developing them. I mean, that's something that Andy Reid used to do all the time in Philadelphia, was draft quarterbacks, flip them for picks down the road. Had a lot of success with it. They've never tried that in Kansas City. So really, by and large, I mean, I think the last quarterback they drafted was maybe outside of Mahomes was Kevin Hogan. I mean, it's been a while since they've tried that. All right, let's go on to running backs, where the Chiefs have a couple of guys who are going to be hitting 30 this year with Samaje Perine and Kareem Hunt. Samaje obviously was the third down back this year. Kareem coming in to bail them out a little bit when Isaiah Pacheco went down. How do you come on down on these guys, Nick?
Yeah, so with Samaje, your goal is to go find a better third down back. A much younger, much more explosive third down back that can be utilized more in the passing offense and be more of a threat for defenses from an explosive perspective. The reason you brought Samaje in was just because you didn't have any other options that late in the season last year, whenever you saw the running back room and you're like, okay, there isn't enough there. And if Pacheco were to get hurt, there wasn't going to be enough there. And so they can't allow that to happen again this year from their offseason approach, because better than anybody, when I was doing the podcast this year, I kept saying they need running backs. They need explosive running backs. They need, like, there was a point where I was talking about if they want to go get Barkley, go do it. I don't care, because you're going to need a balance between run and pass. So, and I mean, Barkley was going to be expensive, and DeAndre Swift was somebody that I was big on last year, but Perine isn't. There's not enough left in that tank, and you want to find younger and cheaper if you can. And with Kareem, I'm fine with Kareem at like a vet minimum, or build in some incentives if you need to or something. That's fine. But I see him as kind of like a short yardage running back, and somebody that you would use on kind of like a specific snap count versus trying to give him the 20 to 30 carries. But it wouldn't stun me one bit if that's where the Chiefs just kind of overhaul that overall running back position, and have Pacheco and whoever they go get out on the market, whether it's free agent or draft wise, because this will be a very rich running back class in the draft. So investing at least one pick in that would be ideal. And if you have to invest more in that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That'll help the offense stay more consistent and be more balanced overall.
Yeah, and this might be, and especially maybe with Kareem, the first time we get somebody where we're talking about, hey, why don't you go test the market, see what you can get out there. And if you don't find what you want, come back to us. Let us know. I mean, check back with us 3-4 weeks later. maybe we can work it out. I mean, there's going to be some players that maybe fall into that category. There have been in the past. Derrick Nottie been on that like a couple of times now. It's like, hey, go chest free agency and come back.
Mike Dana.
Mike Dana was an example, exactly. I mean, and he didn't find what he wanted out there, and you actually got a long-term deal done with a Mike Dana. So with Kareem, I think that's probably where I'm at is, hey, go ahead and see if you can find an offer out there where you can go be a starter, get one more chance, or compete for a starting job, good fit for you, go for it. P. Ryan, again, I'm with you. I think you're probably looking for a little bit of a speed upgrade, especially for the third down back. But that's one thing that the Chiefs definitely need, is speed, period. So if you can't bring speed and explosiveness to that running back room right now, then I'm probably saying, okay, let's wait. Let's see how things develop. And like you said, if the Chiefs are able to draft somebody and, you're beginning of May and Kareem is there or not there, maybe your decision's made for you. So probably nothing that you just have to absolutely secure either one of those guys, though. All right. Chiefs have 20 unrestricted free agents, Nick. Quarter of them, 5 of them are wide receivers. And obviously, a couple of big names here. Let's start at the top with Hollywood and DeAndre.
Hollywood, I let test the market personally. I have concerns that he won't be able to stay healthy, even if they do bring him back, because that's kind of been a knock during his career. So whenever that happened during training camp, that was a bummer that it happened, and when he came back, I feel like the Chiefs had to scheme him open more so than I was hoping for. And maybe that would have changed over the course of a season. I have a different opinion on it and everything. But I just think Hollywood and his agent are going to be trying to find more money elsewhere. That's, 10 million plus type of range. Let's try to see if they can get 10 or 15 from another team per year. And if I'm the Chiefs, I'm really not wanting to go over 6 or 7. And I know that sounds crazy, but there just wasn't enough on tape to be like, you can't go without this. But I totally get if they bring him back. I understand why, with insulating themselves if they don't draft a receiver, if they don't sign some other receivers, and kind of add on to that position to go with, hypothetically, with what may happen with Rice in terms of what may happen from a suspension perspective, if it does, from how he recovers from his injury. And then, not putting all the eggs in the Xavier Worthy basket in terms of expecting him to have another season where he can stay 100% healthy throughout the year. You just don't want to put all that pressure and lean on him completely. You want to have more balance in that wide receiver room collectively.
And I mean, to me, that one of the arguments for Hollywood would be that he plays a position that nobody else that you've got tied up really plays. I mean, could Worthy be the X receiver? I mean, Worthy, I think, could probably play him anywhere. They really like him at that Z spot, though. So if you're able to use him and being on the opposite side, putting him in motion a lot, I mean, that's what he does best. So, Hollywood's more of an X. So he plays that spot that, hey, if you're going to have, Hollywood, Worthy, and Rice on the field at the same time, you got 3 different guys that can all play 3 different spots. So that's an ideal lineup. You're right. I mean, once again, because of the injuries this past year and just the injuries he's had the past couple of seasons, it's been a full, 3 years, I think, since he's, played 16 games. And then you throw in the fact that even in his NFL career, he's never been a number 1 receiver. So you really can't pay him like that. I mean, you have to really pay him like the number 2, number 3 receiver that has an injury history that he has. And if he's, once again, willing to play for a lower amount, he was guaranteed, I think, $6.75 million in 24, something similar to that. Lots of incentives, no problems there. The DeAndre one is interesting to me because, he would be playing and sharing a position with Rashee Rice. And does that make sense? Because 1, you don't know when Rashee's going to be coming back from injury. And 2, you don't know if he is going to be missing any games due to the off the field matters. So does it make sense to at least try and bring back DeAndre Hopkins on a team friendly deal if you can? And I mean, the evidence would seem to suggest that maybe the possibility is there because DeAndre seemed to really like it in Kansas City, really comfortable. He wants to win a Super Bowl. I mean, where else is he going to go? There's only a handful of teams I think that he would want to leave for because he wants to win. Yeah, that's the one thing missing from the resume. I don't think he's going to go somewhere for the most money. He's going to go somewhere where he thinks he can win a Super Bowl. No. I think he probably feels like Kansas City's the best place.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of if they can have a number that matches what his usage would be in the offense at his age. Because other than, the Tampa Bay game, like the Tampa Bay game, whenever the Chiefs had used him on Monday Night Football and he had that kind of opening game and everything, you kind of thought that was going to, okay, with more time in the offense, he'll be able to kind of have more of that type of production. But then other than a handful of catches, he just never was really able to get in that same ballpark and match in that way. And athletically, you do see the decline from who he was, and that's to be expected at his age. That's not a knock on on him. That's just what happens with that amount. Because DeAndre Hopkins was in Eric Fisher's draft class and Travis Kelce's draft class. That's what I think people forget sometimes is he was in that 2013 draft class. DeAndre Hopkins has played in the league as long as Andy Reid's been the head coach of the Chiefs. So that's a while. In football years, that's a very long time. So the longevity of where DeAndre is still able to be productive and everything is the tip of the cap to him in terms of where he's at in his career and how he's taking care of his body to be able to get to this point. I just think financially, I get the feeling he's probably going to want more than what I think is going to be reasonable for what they'll use him production wise. And I think that's where in a lot of the guys we're talking about throughout this whole list, I think that's kind of where the difference is going to be, is they think they're worth this amount and they might be on the open market for another team that can take the intangibles of what they are and everything. But for the Chiefs, with where they're at from a salary cap perspective, they're going to have to be really, even after they create money and everything, they've just got to be really mindful at how are they using this $2 million here? How are they using that $7 million there to really make sure that they get the most production out of the cost?
Yeah. And and to me, both, DeAndre and Hollywood are both in the same category to me value wise. I mean, yes, you'd like to keep them, but it can't be at a ton of money, and it probably needs to be with some pretty incentive laden deals if you are going to keep them. Right. The other three decisions might be a little bit easier. Justin Watson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Mecole Hardman. I mean, is there anybody here, Nick, that you need to sign out of the gate on March 12th or make sure they're tied up so they don't even hit the market?
No, you got to let them all hit the market because Watson's starting his decline, as I know you and I both have chatted about before. Watson's lost a couple steps. So, yes, he was one of the few receivers that could play all three positions, and he'd block hard and everything. But as you saw, the Chiefs sparingly used him down the stretch. Like, he didn't see the field as much as he had earlier in the year. And so, from a snap count perspective, there just wasn't a lot there. Mecole Hardman, they've already kind of replaced him as a returner with Nico Remigio. So there's just not, other than a returner, there's just an occasional time where you throw some swing passes and stuff like that out to him, and Worthy's kind of taken over that part of it. So unless Worthy were to get hurt, I just don't see Mecole having a really big role in the offense overall. And then finally, Juju Smith-Schuster, kind of, if you weren't going to be able to get DeAndre back, but you wanted somebody who could catch over the middle and reliable and understood the offense, then Juju gives you a couple of those same snaps. So I think you're really kind of deciding more so between who's the insurance for Rice in terms of it being potentially Juju Smith-Schuster or DeAndre, because I feel like they're essentially the same receiver, how they'd be used in the Chiefs offense.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty optimistic about what Nico Remigio could be. So, to me, hey, I think he could be a Justin Watson type. I mean, it's just as far as production goes and where he's kind of at in your rotation. I mean, if Nico Remigio became a 400-yard receiver, I mean, that would be a great expectation. And if he does, he completely replaces Justin Watson. And, you have Worthy, you have Rice, you've got Remigio. Let's conclude him there. Let's say you're able to keep a Hollywood Brown. Let's say you're even considering a DeAndre Hopkins. Well, at this point, you got 5 receivers. I mean, where does Juju fit in? I mean, do you really need to be in another spot where you're carrying 6 or 7 guys? And And how many of them are speed merchants? I mean, and that's one thing that this team, I think, needs offensively, is to get more speed at receiver as well.
Yep.
So, I mean, if you are going to consider keeping DeAndre, who is not a speed guy, then you need that more explosiveness in there. So that's why I could see, certainly, even though, hey, Juju's a good guy, I'd let him test the market, see what he's got elsewhere. I mean, maybe once again, you come back to May, June, and you feel like there's a hole there. Maybe Juju's your guy, but otherwise, yeah, I'm kind of walking on. Tight end, Nick, only one, Jody Fortson, and fan favorite, came back. It just feels so hard for the guy, because it just seems like just every time he gets a chance, injuries come up and bite him. He's 29, Nick. I don't know if there's much more left in the tank after another injury, though.
I mean, he's went to IR 4 or 5 times with the Chiefs now. Well, he's been part of their roster, and I can't remember if he did with Miami. But like, I mean, just the Chiefs alone, I think it's 4 different times that he's ended up on IR. It just seems each season, unfortunately, no matter how much he put into it. Because if you remember when he first got here, he was a wide receiver out of Valdosta State, and like, he was at the receiver position. They tried him out for a while. Then at camp, they moved him to tight end, and he found a home, and he was able to kind of contribute. And that's the way he's been able to kind of stay in the league. Because if he had stayed at receiver, I think his NFL career would have ended a while ago. Yeah,
with Fortson coming back from the torn ACL mid-season, you can't sign a guy that's coming back from injury. So this, to me, is even if you wanted to consider bringing back Fortson, you're waiting until training camp or down the road to see just how healthy he is. So it's probably the end of the road for Jody Fortson. I mean, I'm always going to be rooting for the guy, never betting against him, because he has come back from things before, but this will be kind of a tough one. All right, the conversation, Nick, on the offensive side is offensive line, and this will be probably the 2 or the more difficult decisions to make. Let's face it, the biggest free agent name that the Chiefs have, Trey Smith. What are we gonna do with Trey?
You already know what I'm gonna do. What I would do. I pay that man his money. No, I mean, for Trey Smith, I think he's worth what he's gonna end up getting on the open market. Now, people could argue and say, well, he gets a lot of holding penalties. He does, but part of the reason he gets the holding penalties is because the teams are specifically running stunt set that side because of the way that Juwan sets and how big of a gap there is between Trey and Juwan. So at times, Trey's got to make the decision, do I hold so 15 stays upright, or do I let this defender go by and not have fans be able to talk about me having holding penalties? He chooses the thing that keeps the checks coming in. And so, everybody just kind of deals with it and tolerates it collectively instead of fixing the actual problem that's at the heart of it. I'm sorry, I'm just being honest right there. But
brutally honest.
Yes. Would I love to see him anywhere at 18 to 20 million per year? Yeah. And I think he's worth it. And I think they're going to miss his presence on that offensive line if he's not there. I think they're going to miss his leadership if he's not on that offensive line. And if somebody told me, hey, you got to choose keeping Joe Thuney and his price or signing an ascending player in Trey Smith, I would choose Trey Smith personally. Because Joe Thuney's 33 years old. So you're going to get a descending player over the next couple of years. And that's not on Joe. It's just a part of being in the league as long as he has. So for me personally, that's what I would do. I think the Chiefs will do the exact opposite. But that's what I would do in terms of Trey.
And let's go ahead and bring in the franchise tag possibility here, because you obviously could tag Trey Smith. Part of the problem there is that the tag number is set by basically how much tackles make, because there's only an offensive line tag. There's not a tackle tag. There's not a guard or a center tag. There's just offensive line, which means it's based on how much money the tackles make. So you'd have to tag him at $25 million. Right now, the Chiefs couldn't even afford that under the salary cap. And they don't really want to be carrying $25 million in tag money around for very long. So, they would be in a spot that if you put the tag on Trey Smith, you're forcing yourself to do one of two things, essentially. Either get a deal done with him quickly or trade him. And neither one, it comes back into the L'Jarius Smith, L'Jarius Sneed situation, as I get my S names crossed. the trade value for a guard is not high. As good as Trey Smith is, teams aren't just going to be lining up to give you a first-round pick for a guard and then pay them a bunch of money. So it's not like you're going to be able to get, you might not even be able to get what you got for L'Jarius Sneed. And there might not even be a trade market for a Trey Smith. Whereas on the open market, sure. I mean, teams have no problems giving up money. It's draft picks are a little bit different issue. So should the Chiefs tag him? It's probably a bad decision financially and business-wise to tag Trey Smith. I don't necessarily think it changes your ability to sign him because Trey seems to love Kansas City. He's a great fit here. Obviously, he's got marketing opportunities. He's got that barbecue money coming in. So there's a place for him in Kansas City. I go back and forth on this one, Nick, but I'm coming around more and more to your way that I think that it's probably, to me, it's more important to keep a Trey Smith than it would be to let go of a Trey Smith because then you can keep a Hollywood Brown. I mean, if your decision is like, hey, wait a minute, we can pay $16 million for a guard, but we can't pay $22 to Trey Smith. Well, if that means letting go of somebody who's making $6 or $7 million, or even somebody's making $6 or $7 million, so you can keep Trey Smith, I think I'd keep Trey Smith. So I'm leaning more to your way, but I get why this, business-wise, it could be a very impossible decision for Brett Veach.
Well, and where people are going to argue, say, well, Joe Thuney's got versatility where you can play tackle or guard if needed. Totally get that, but you shouldn't be in a position where Joe Thuney has to do that. That's the bigger problem. And that's a much bigger discussion about offensive line and offensive line development. So that's its own ballpark.
And probably, we could even have a separate discussion about whether or not you could even play Joe Thuney at tackle going forward, because one, he is going to be 33 years old, so it's even going to be harder. But two, there's now a lot of film out there for Joe Thuney. And I think you saw in the last couple of games, teams figuring out how you can attack him. So I don't know if Joe Thuney, long-term at left tackle in the future is necessarily a viable option.
So we've discussed that part of that argument for people that would want to rebuttal that. So there that is.
There you go. Last offensive player, left tackle, DJ Humphries. Do you want to bring him back for another possible run and see if he can fill that left tackle void for one season?
I think a big part of it's going to be with when they did if they do the exit physical and everything, where they feel like that knee was at, how they feel like that knee responded while he was under their care. And their training and everything and where that's all at. I think that'll determine a lot about what they decide to do on that front. If they feel comfortable with it, I get it being somewhere in the same ballpark of what it was to where, that 4 to 6 million possibility if you have to is kind of a break glass in case of emergency tackle. If you have to go in with DJ Humphries, the left tackle for the season, I get it. If that's the road that they end up being forced, but you better have exhausted all of their options and all of their doors possible before that. Because I think going into the year, they're going to need 2 left tackles. They're going to need a veteran left tackle, and if that's DJ Humphries, that's DJ Humphries. But they're also going to need another additional tackle, whether that's somebody that they draft or even more high-profile veteran that they get in free agency, that you're going to count on them to be the reliable. And then if you have an additional veteran behind them, that's okay with being the backup. But that left tackle spot, you can't put it in the same position you did last year to where you had a rookie and a guy who was in his second year and you had no solution behind them. You just can't. You've tried that road didn't work. And there's reasons why that road didn't work. So doing that again this year is just asking for more of the same problems throughout the year that end up costing you in the end.
I mean, let's face it, as far as players who are under contract right now, your options at left tackle, and I'm crossing off, honestly, Kingsley Suamataia and Wanye Morris because they've had their chance. I think they've shown the Chiefs who they are. The Chiefs, I mean, I can tell you, are much more comfortable with the future of Kingsley Suamataia as a guard. And when you consider the possibility that you do walk away from Joe Thuney and that huge cap number, everything makes even more sense for Kingsley Suamataia to possibly move to guard. Wanye is probably better equipped to be a right tackle if he's going to play right tackle. I mean, if you had to go right now to a game, I mean, Jawan Taylor is once again probably your option of guys under contract at left tackle, and I have no reason to believe that that's what the Chiefs want to do. So DJ Humphries, I mean, at least is an affordable option. So as long as it's not too costly, as long as he's willing to do another incentive-laden deal, I could see that being a strong possibility. But otherwise, I mean, the left tackle on this team is probably not in this roster. And like you said, I mean, I have a hard time believing that the Chiefs are going to be able to invest a draft pick that's going to net them a left tackle, because they don't have a top 20 pick and they don't have the path to get into the top 20. So they're going to have to look at free agency, and they have to have a backup too. And maybe that's DJ.
And the other thing that I'm going to keep cautioning people, that's fine if the Chiefs invest a draft pick, whether they move up or they get a tackle that's in the draft in general, wherever the position is. Now becomes the part where I feel like they're struggling is, okay, now, are you able to develop that tackle? How long does it take to develop that offensive lineman? And are you capable of developing that offensive lineman? Because you can keep investing money, you can keep investing picks, and you can keep giving them everything possible to succeed. But if the development's not happening, then there's a problem in it overall. And that's the biggest thing of this Chiefs offseason. Where is that problem on the offensive line? Is it something from a characteristic scouting perspective? Is it something in the translation from what they think from a scouting perspective to what's being developed on the field? Is it from a scheme perspective? Where is the problem? And as the number one thing the Chiefs have to get down to in this offseason, because it's been a problem for over a decade now in my book.
Yeah. All right, let's move over to the defensive side, where if you thought that the Chiefs having 5 free agent wide receivers was a lot, I guess 6 defensive linemen who are on the free agent market. So a good full 30% of this year's free agent class is on the defensive line, and there's going to be obviously some comings and goings here for sure. You've got Tershawn Wharton, Charles Omenihu, Marlon Tuipulotu, Mike Pennell, Derrick Nnadi, and Joshua Uche. And I mean, it kind of runs the gamut here between, some players that I think you're obviously going to let walk, test the market, versus some guys that maybe you really want to consider bringing back.
Yeah, so I'll start with Marlon. Marlon, I think they'll be able to do for vet minimum. I don't think they're worried about that. Derrick Nnadi, that's a guy that's hit the market every single time, and they've been able to bring back in April, June, whenever they want. Like, Nnadi has always been able to come back, so I don't think that's going to change. Joshua Uche, I think, is going to be let to hit the market. There wasn't, unfortunately, much of an impact that was able to be made. For Mike Pennell, turning 34, I mean, I don't think there's going to be a ton of competition there. I think if he wants to come back and the Chiefs want him, the Chiefs think he can give him a certain amount of snaps in the run game, I think they're all for it. I think Wharton's in the same position Mike Dana was last year. I think he's going to have the option to get paid by another team to potentially work in as a rotational 3-tech, if not a starting 3-tech for a 4-3 front. And I think that's just the decision he's going to make for himself. And I got a feeling he'll happily test that market. And if he finds the right offer from another team, I think he goes there. But I think if it's, if they're somewhere in that $5 million range, and I think they could do it. But if it's inching towards $7 million a year, I think that's going to be a lot tougher to be able to do. I think you can pay one backup defensive lineman the $7 million per year average, and the Chiefs elected to do that last year with Mike Dana. So by doing that, I think they've kind of set themselves in that situation on that front. And then finally with Charles Omenihu, I'm sure he's going to want to test what he can get on the open market and see if he can find a better offer than $8 million per year. But I think he's a good starter. I think he's going to be a better player this year than what I think he'll be much more on the road to recovery. So it'll be interesting to see if there's another team out there that's willing to invest in that on a long-term deal that he feels more comfortable with, or if he wants to do more of a prove-it deal, another 1 or 2 year type of deal, and like an $8 million a year, $9 million a year type of thing. Then I'd be all for that for Chiefs if they can keep it under 10. And again, all these numbers we're throwing out, everything that we're doing overall, we're doing that with the mind that the Chiefs are going to create the necessary cap space that they have to for the decisions they're collectively making. So we understand the salary cap's not at this point now, but each one of those we've talked about, we're being mindful of the fact that the Chiefs will have created the cap space they need because they will be in these negotiations and they will know what they need to create from doing restructions or movements and things of that nature. So, yeah, that's where I'm at on that. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think Uche, you're letting test the market. If he doesn't find somewhere else, I could see the Chiefs trying to bring him back on a vet minimum deal, but I'm just not sure the fit is there. Derrick Nottie, Mike Pennell, ditto with you. You let them test the market. If they're still available come late April, early May, want to come back, vet minimum deals, perfect. Bring them on back. Tui Peludo should be available on a vet minimum deal. It comes down to Amenahue and Wharton. And Tershawn Wharton, I think, is going to get paid. He had a really good season at a contract year for that type of position. You're right. There are probably defenses that are a better fit for him. As good as I think he has been and as an important piece as he has been for the Chiefs in development. I mean, he's been essentially a starter since his rookie season, despite the injuries. Done a really good job, but I think that there's going to be some teams out there that are just like, they see a better fit and more potential than the Chiefs can afford with Wharton. Amenahue is interesting to me because Amenahue's, let's face it, he's been putting on the full court press about staying in Kansas City. He clearly wants to stay in KC, and that helps. Now, if he's just, wants to stay, but he's like, hey, I also want $15 million per, that's not going to work. But if, Amenahue is another one of these players that fits in that category. He wants to win. He wants to win a Super Bowl. He's happy in this locker room. He's been in 3 different locker rooms at this point. It's clear that he understands that Kansas City is different, and that helps. So, hey, is he willing to leave some money on the table to stay in Kansas City? I think he probably is. Could the Chiefs go higher than 8? Probably. They'd have to be a little creative. But, once again, even if you wanted to do a longer term deal, and to your point, he should be stronger in year 2 back from the knee injury, you're buying 28, 29, and 30 years. That's doable. I mean, he's still a fairly young guy for essentially getting a 3rd contract. So I could see it happening. The linebacker, there is only one, Nick, and this is our one of our other big decisions.
Is this like a Highlander thing? There
can only be one. Yes, it's the quickening. And speaking of the quickening, Nick Bolton. I mean, he is clearly Steve Spagnuolo's favorite. The players have told us that he is Steve Spagnuolo's favorite. Right. Can you keep Nick Bolton? Because the expectations for what he could make vary pretty widely. I mean, he could either be one of the better paid middle linebackers in the league, or maybe he ends up with a little bit less than we think.
Yeah, it all depends on his market. I think everybody will have a really good idea this time next week where his market's at. And you'll start hearing reports after the combine ends in Indy where his market likely is at. So I think on that front, you'll have a better overall number versus it being as widely predicted as it is. Because depending on who you talk to, some people say it could be 15 million. Some people say it could be 12. Some people think it could be 7 or 8. It just depends on who you talk to. Because from a skill set perspective, his struggles in coverage is what should keep him from the 15 to 17 million per year range in that front. Who he is as a run stuffer, how physical he is as a run stuffer, that part of that game is what gets him as close to that as possible. And with him being one of the better linebackers that'll be on the market, that's going to be appealing for a team that's really wanting to have a physical presence in terms of stopping the run. So, yeah, it's going to be all over the place overall in terms of what he potentially could be. For the Chiefs, I just think there's got to be a number they've got to be comfortable with paying him and sticking with that. And so that's not going to be easy. I think they're going to have to be disciplined in that. And the downside for them is if he does go somewhere else, they've got to figure out, does Drew Tranquil take over the green dot as the leader of that defense, and does he move into that middle linebacker role? Do they feel Leo is capable of doing that, or do they like where he's at? Because personally, I like where Leo is at. I would leave him on that front, but you don't know until you physically actually test some things. And there'll be some things that they've tested in closed door practices we don't know about to get that answer this year at various points.
All right, so if we went with Spotrack's market value prediction for Nick Bolton, which is 4 years, $49 million, comes out to be like $12.3 million per year. Would you do it?
That was one of the numbers that I said there.
Yep.
So, I just, as long as they knew who they had as replacement, then I'm for it. I think that's a little expensive for a guy that's going to struggle in coverage. It's not necessarily going to get better in his career at coverage. It's just who he is athletically. So for me, I'd still be a little nervous about it, but I'm not gonna get frustrated, and I'm not gonna be like, I can't believe they did that. But if they do get in that $15-17 million range, I'm like, oh boy. So I think that's kind of the cap on where you want to leave that at in terms of how much you're willing to pay if you have to get to that point.
I think I'm going to be pretty aggressive here and say if you can get 4 years, $49 million for Nick Bolton, I'm doing it. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, one obviously is he's still extremely young. I mean, you'd be getting his 25, 26, 27, 28 seasons. I mean, if it's 4 years deal, it's probably only a 3-year deal with an option for a fourth. So you'd still be getting 25 to 27 as far as peak years. And as we're going to be talking about in a minute, one of the other free agents is Justin Reed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you can afford, if you're Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs in this defense, I don't think you can afford to lose Nick Bolton and Justin Reed at the same time.
Right.
They're just both too important to that defense. And to the point that Steve Spagnuolo kind of talked about late in the season, when you've got the continuity that they've had, you can do things that you couldn't do 3 years ago. You know, you need that institutional knowledge. You need that experience there. And if you lose both those guys, I mean, and let's face it, if you're going to pay one of these two players, you pay the younger player. That's just the reality of it. So, I mean, I'm not ruling out that you can't keep them both and not ruling out that you don't pay Justin Reed. But, I mean, if it's one or the other, you pay the younger guy. And to me, that's just why I think, hey, if you get 4 years, 49, I'd do it in a heartbeat. You're right. If it gets to be 4 years for 60, it's a little bit more of a heartburn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I'm not set either way on it. I'm not like, well, it's got to be this or it's got to be that. Like I totally get, because you just got to look at all the factors and everything, which we're doing here on this podcast for all of you.
Which we are doing, and I alluded to it. You know, the Chiefs only have one free agent in the secondary. It's Justin Reed, and 28 years old. So going in, I mean, he just turned 28, so he's going to be going into his 28, 29, 30-year-old seasons. There's a reason right there that you could do a 3-year deal and still be getting Justin Reed at below, age 30. But, at the same time, Justin Reed wants to get paid. I wouldn't blame him if he wants to get paid, because he's got a ring. He's got everything else he needs. Now, hey, get as much money as you can.
Yeah, and this is kind of like the last big payday for him in secondary before he's going to have to make a decision on, 1, when he wants to stop playing, 2, does he want to try the kicking thing full-time in his 30s? And then just kind of 3, where, because physically, this past year with that quad injury, I don't feel like he was ever the same this year as he was the year before. And he could still come downhill, and he could still make a difference in run support and kind of covering over the middle of the field and everything. But there was times where he would be chasing a tight end or somebody across the field going deep. And I think that quad injury really hampered him a lot this year. And I just don't feel like we ever really truly got to see a 100% healthy Justin Reed and everything. So I think if you saw 100% healthy Justin Reed this year, I think it's kind of you figure it out, make it work, but that put a little doubt in my mind in terms of is this where this is headed, or is this just kind of an anomaly for this year? And they've already kind of started to slowly adjust it to where Jaden Hicks kind of took on part of that role that he was previously doing, and then Brian Cook has another part of that role. And there may be a point where they have to decide Brian Cook, maybe he's kind of more of the strong safety and Jaden Hicks is more of the free safety in terms of coverage and how they approach it and everything down the road here. So, it'll be interesting. And then also they've got to make some decisions in the secondary next year financially to where that may force what Justin Reed's financial decision is this year's, because they may not be able to pay Justin Reed so they can pay Trent McDuffie next year and down the road. Or, because Trent McDuffie, because for people that don't know, Jalen Watson, Trent McDuffie, Brian Cook, Josh Williams, like they're all up next year. So the Chiefs financially, to be able to pay all them, it may have to come at the cost of not being able to pay Justin Reed. But don't get me wrong, Justin Reed clearly wants to come back from his presser after the Super Bowl. He wants to be here. He understands the importance here. He likes it here. So it's just a matter of if they can find a number that can allow them to have a long-term future with him and also with the decisions they're going to make next year in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, Justin Reed has been a great fit here. He clearly loves it. I mean, and once again, he's been a guy who's been around and knows the value of what, a quality locker room and a quality organization can be. And I mean, he's let's just say, I mean, he's even publicly, he's made some pretty stark remarks about the fact that Kansas City's different than Houston. So he knows what can be when you've got an organization that doesn't know what it's doing versus one that does, and he knows the value of that. Market value for him, that's Spotrac, 3 years, $51 million, which would be fairly close to what Budda Baker got at 28, the same age, 3 years, $54 million. So I can't say that's an outrageous, value. But it would be, I think, beyond what the Chiefs can pay. So, I mean, if I think Justin Reed wants market value, and once again, it comes down to which position can you pay? Is it safety or linebacker? I mean, once again, Nick Bolton is the more affordable option. So, and like you said, you do have to be prepared. And the other thing that factors into this as well is the Chiefs have clearly drafted for Justin Reed's replacement. Yep. They haven't done that. The only thing that they've done at linebacker to prepare for Nick Bolton possibly leaving was sign Drew Tranquill long-term. Drew Tranquill's going to be 30. I don't know if Drew Tranquill's, where you want to make sure that you're going at age 30 to be in the middle linebacker and replacing Nick Bolton. I think you like Drew Tranquill where he's at right now in the role that he plays. So, whereas you've drafted, and if next year you've got 3 safeties on the field and Brian Cook, Jaden Hicks, and Jamari Connor, that's a pretty good trio. So I wouldn't have any problems with that. It's hard to walk away from Justin Reed, but I think you're going to have to let him test the market, and I just think he's going to find too good of a deal out there.
Yeah, especially if it's going to be $17 million a year like they're projecting there. That's not something the Chiefs are going to be able to. The chances of them being able to match that's going to be incredibly tough. So that's unfortunate in that regard, because Justin Reed's been great for the Kansas City community. He's obviously great in the locker room. He's always willing to talk for anybody, and he's willing to do multiple days in a row, even though he didn't have to. So, yeah, I mean, on that front, like, I just want people to know he's been a stand-up guy, and he's been the perfect guy for that locker room and for this organization and for the community with what he's done with his with his organization and the impact he's had on the youth in this community. So those are things I do want to make sure get mentioned.
And I underscore that because when it comes to the media, no one has been more stand up or more accountable than Justin Reed during his time here. I mean, I give it up and give him props to him because he's never turned anything down. After a loss, he's always the guy that's there to take the hits and answer questions. Yep. I know I've taken us too long, Nick, but we do have one last one to discuss.
Yep.
And that is fan favorite long snapper James Winchester.
Okay.
You bringing back James?
Yeah, I mean, that's you do that minimum, move on with your life. That's not a tough decision.
Yeah, I think James still wants to come back. I talked to him at the Super Bowl, and I've talked to him a few times during the season. I still think he's going year by year at this point. I certainly get the sense that he wants to play at least another season. He's also getting up there. I think he's going to be 34, 35. But it's long snapper. You can play at that point. I think he can still play. He can still do the job. You know things are going to be tough when you don't have a James Winchester anymore, because having a veteran long snapper and reliable as he is an important thing to have. So, I think the Chiefs would be fine keeping him around for another season. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they do keep him around if something gets done before the beginning of the new league year, because that's when it usually seems to happen with Winchester if he does come back to get the extension done before the start of the new league year. So he might be one of the ones that is the first move. So we'll find out and see what happens. Nick, you and I could talk about this all day long, but
Yeah, but you still want to get into the positional salary thing. That was interesting.
Let's get into that. I mean, let's become a wrap up here and everything about just kind of where the Chiefs do stand and where they have been spending their money, where they're projected to spend their money in 2025, and kind of how they compare to the rest of the league. And so I'll let you kind of break this down a little bit.
Okay, so for people, you got to give Spot Track credit on this. So I want to make sure people understand that. So if you're looking at the Chiefs' overall cap spending, this is the thing that you need to know. And this is what general managers have to kind of be mindful of at certain positions, is how much are they spending versus the league at that position. And then also just kind of where are they maybe have too much money invested in a spot that they need to kind of even out over other position groups. So for the Chiefs, the number one spot that they spend is offensive line, and as of right now in terms of cap, so it'll be $71.9 million is what they're slated to spend with the current offensive line in its current form. Second most is obviously quarterback with some guy named Patrick Mahomes. Phenomenal investment, even if it's just in him, but it's not. So that's $67 million in cap this year that they have designated to the quarterback spot. Third most is along the defensive line, most of that coming from Chris Jones at $52.94 million. Then after that is tight end. A big part of that obviously is $27.3 million. Most of that obviously coming from Travis Kelce. Then behind that is secondary before they've even made a decision on, Justin Reed. So then that's right now at $20 million. Then from there you have linebacker that's at 14. That could change depending on Nick Bolton. Then you have wide receiver that is at $10.94 million, and that'll change, and that's probably one of the lower ones in the league. And whenever I click on it to adjust it, that is the third lowest in the NFL. The Steelers are cheaper at 8.47. The Chargers are cheaper at 10.2. That'll change for the Chargers. And then the Chiefs are the third lowest, and the Packers the fourth lowest at that. The highest in the NFL right now in terms of cap is the Seahawks at $68 million at wide receiver, and the Jets at $64, followed by Tampa Bay at $52. In terms of offensive line, I'm going to go back to that. Offensive line, the Chiefs right now in terms of cap are the third most in the NFL. The Panthers are first at $94 million, over $20 million of that coming from Robert Hunt. Then you have the Texans at $81 million, followed by the Chiefs at $71 million. This is again in terms of cap. So the Chiefs spend the third most in terms of cap in the NFL at the offensive line position, and it's the highest in their team. And then the other thing that I forgot to mention here is the Chiefs running back room. The Chiefs running back room it's their lowest spending overall at $3.1 million. And the highest in terms of running back is the Saints at 18.4. So for the Chiefs are third lowest in the NFL at running back. Dolphins are at 2.6, and then the Cowboys are at $2 million. And then Denver's right behind the Chiefs at $4 million. So in terms of positional spending, that just gives you an overall cap idea at where the Chiefs are at. It was something interesting Matt and I were talking about, because when we're looking at this before we decided on re-sign possibilities, you're like, okay, where would you add? Where does it even out here? Where does it even out there? And then if the Chiefs do something with Mahomes roster bonus, that's going to drop that quarterback number. If the Chiefs do anything on the offensive line in terms of cap adjustment, that'll drop that number, but then it may go right back up because they added somebody else. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting overall to see what teams are doing in terms of positional spending. And there's another team I totally forgot to look at, but I'm intrigued to look at. The Philadelphia Eagles offensive line spending $51 million on their offensive line. On their defensive line, if you take a guess right now, I want you to shout it out, even though Matt and I won't be able to hear it. What do you think that, just like the Price is Right, what do you think the final retail number is along the defensive line? I'm going to give you 3 seconds. And the actual number is $17.84 million. That's how much they spent to do what they did in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs.
It helps when you draft well.
It does. So drafting well and developing is also very key. You can get all the draft picks you want and you can spend them all, but if you don't develop them, in that 4-year window that you have to develop them, you have problems, especially in the Super Bowl. So,
yeah, there's and now one of those. I mean, obviously, those are 2025 numbers. Josh Sweat is a free agent. Brandon Graham's a free agent. So there's a couple of things in there that does bring that number down. But it does tell you once again, because hey, Josh Sweat was like, I think, made a $10 million average annual value. So that wasn't like a huge number either. The other thing that really jumped out at me, Nick, about this is that the Chiefs offensively are the number 2 team in the league in offensive cap use for 2025 right now. $175 million in cap space. $175 million. $73 million on the defensive side. They're number 2 in offensive spending. In defensive spending, they are, let's see, 32, 31, 30, 29, 20, 27th in the league in defensive spending.
And I pulled up last year's just for a cap thing here. Chiefs offense was at $145 million last year in terms of overall spending. They spent $60.71 million in cap on the O-line. And then on defense, they spent $70.48 overall defense. And for the Eagles, Matt, are you ready for what the defensive line's actual retail value was?
I'm ready.
Last year, $14.82. So they're going up by $3 million, but they may lose 3 different players. So yeah, no, for them to have that level of production that they did at the cap hit rate, that means that they did a really good job in terms of developing and using their scheme properly.
And like you mentioned, I mean, there's other decisions and factors to include in all of this, and we're going to be addressing those in the next couple of weeks because, like you mentioned, the Chiefs don't have all the cap space in the world right now. They need to make some decisions that will free up some space, and some of those may just be restructures. Some of those may mean parting ways with players, but we'll be talking about that leading up to free agency, which, as mentioned at the top of the show, March 12th is the beginning of the new league year. That is when everything kicks off. March 10th is the date that the window opens with which teams can negotiate with potential free agents. So we're not very far, Nick. I mean, we're 15 days away, literally, from all the excitement of free agency truly kicking off.
Yep, and in some future weeks, we will be talking about some potential free agent tackles. Just got to wait for the combine to resolve itself a little bit and see what each one of those teams potentially does in terms of franchise tag or trying to re-sign a player to see if they'll actually be potentially hitting the market or not. But Matt and I will evaluate those tackles for you down the road. Don't you worry.
That is right, because it's not done yet. I mean, teams always have to make some moves before the beginning of the new league year cap-wise, and sometimes there's contracts that have some roster bonuses also that force teams to make some moves in the first couple of days of the new league year. So we'll see if anybody gets added to the pool. There's always some surprises. Might be just limited to what we're expecting right now, but hey, maybe there will be a surprise name that gets added to the free agent pool at some positions, including left tackle. You never know.
That's right, Matt. You never know.
It's the NFL, baby. You never know. All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for sticking with us today. I know it was a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it. We hope we went pretty as in-depth as you needed there on the free agents that the Chiefs have and what they should do, what we would do if we were Brett Veach. As always, hey, you got any questions, feel free to mention it in the comments. We will follow up with you. Tuesday night, come back. And if you've got some questions, join us then, because we'll be doing the Chiefs Digest live Q&A on Tuesday night. You can bring your questions and drive the conversation. Let us know what you're thinking. And obviously, next week, we'll be back with another episode of 41 is the Mic, dealing with the offseason in your thread. Between now and then, make sure to like us on any of the platforms where you're enjoying this program. Hit the bell, whatever it takes, so you get reminded that you've got new programming from Nick and I coming at you, and whether it's 41 is the Mic or Chiefs Digest on YouTube. Nick, any parting thoughts from you?
Just make good choices this week so we can see you back here next week.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.